Good morning. I'm Matt Olson, the Assistant Attorney General for National Security. Thank you all very much for being here. I'm joined by Matt Axelrod, the Assistant Secretary for Export Enforcement at the Department of Commerce. Exactly 3 months ago, we launched the Disruptive Technology Strike Force. This is an interagency enforcement effort led by the Departments of Justice and Commerce. The FBI and Homeland Security investigations, our law enforcement partners who are integral to this effort, are also represented here on stage. I also want to thank the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General for their support of our work. The mission of the Strike Force is to prevent foreign adversaries from obtaining critical advanced technologies. We've established 14 local cells around the country, more than a third of which are represented here today on stage, to investigate and prosecute violations of U.S. laws. Our work is supported by an interagency team of data analysts who identify gaps in enforcement and prioritize our lines of effort. Collectively, our work is critical to defend U.S. military readiness, to preserve our technological advantage over our adversaries, and to protect human rights and democratic values worldwide. 5 U.S. attorneys from around the country are here with us. Breon Peace of the Eastern District of New York, Gary Restaino of the District of Arizona, Martina Estrada of the Central District of California, Ismail Ramsey of the Northern District of California, and Damian Williams of the Southern District of New York. Today, we are announcing 5 cases from each of these districts. The cases, which were brought by the U.S. Attorney's offices in partnership with the National Security Division, span a range of emerging technologies and malicious actors. These cases demonstrate the breadth and complexity of the threats we face, as well as what is at stake. And they show our ability to accelerate investigations and surge our collective resources to defend against these threats. As you'll hear more about in a moment, 2 of the 5 cases involve dismantling alleged procurement networks created to help the Russian military and intelligence services obtain sensitive technologies in violation of U.S. export control laws. These technologies include military tactical equipment, airplane braking technology, and quantum cryptography. 2 other cases charge former software engineers with stealing software and hardware source code from U.S. tech companies in order to market it to Chinese competitors, including, in one of the cases, Chinese state-owned enterprises. The stolen code is alleged to be trade secrets used by the U.S. companies to develop self-driving cars and advanced automated manufacturing equipment. The final case charges a Chinese national with violating U.S. sanctions in attempting to sell to Iran materials used to produce weapons of mass destruction. The defendant tried to arrange the sale using 2 Chinese companies that the U.S. government has sanctioned for supporting Iran's ballistic missile program. We stand vigilant in enforcing U.S. laws to stop the flow of sensitive technologies to our foreign adversaries. And that means everything, using our criminal investigations and prosecutions to administrative enforcement actions to private sector outreach. So let me be clear. We are committed to doing all we can to prevent these advanced tools from falling into the hands of foreign adversaries, who wield them in ways that threaten not only our nation's security, but democratic values everywhere. And with that, let me turn it over to Assistant Secretary Axelrod and then to the U.S. attorneys to discuss these prosecutions.
Thanks, Matt. When we announced the Disruptive Technology Strike Force in February, we said it would bring together top experts to attack tomorrow's national security threats today. That's exactly what we've done. We brought together agents, analysts, and prosecutors across the country to disrupt foreign actors who are trying to siphon advanced U.S. technology and then use that technology for malign purposes contrary to our national security interests. Today, we're starting to see results. 5 coordinated enforcement actions across the country, including arrests, indictments, and a temporary denial order that demonstrate the strike force's impact, and it's just the beginning. Stopping sensitive technologies, like those used to develop quantum cryptography, from being misappropriated from foreign countries, is a critical national security priority. As Assistant Secretary for Export Enforcement at the Department of Commerce, I lead a team of law enforcement agents and intelligence analysts whose mission is clear and singular: keeping our country's most sensitive technologies out of the world's most dangerous hands. What qualifies as the most dangerous hands has changed over time. 20 years ago, in the post-9/11 world, it was primarily Al-Qaeda and other non-state actors. In 2023, though, our greatest national security concerns stem from the actions of nation-states like China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Nation-states that want to acquire sensitive U.S. technology to advance their military capabilities, with their ultimate goal being to shift the world's balance of power. We formed the Disruptive Technology Strike Force, a powerful partnership between DOJ, Commerce, FBI, HSI, and others to help combat this threat. Foreign nation states are working hard to acquire our most sensitive technologies. We're working even harder to stop them. We're committed to using an all-tools approach, including both administrative and criminal authorities. And that's part of what you see in today's actions. In addition to the criminal charges announced today, we also took administrative action in the Arizona case. This morning, I signed a temporary denial order suspending the export privileges of a Florida company called MIC P&I, the Russian airline Smartavia, a freight forwarder in the Maldives called Intermodal Maldives, and 2 Russian nationals residing in Florida for diverting civilian aircraft parts to Russia. The 2 Russians were also indicted criminally, as you'll hear shortly from U.S. Attorney Restaino. The message coming from our collective agencies could not be clearer. We are working in lockstep to protect American technology and to counter the threat posed by nation states seeking to exploit that technology to threaten our national security. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to U.S. Attorney Breon Peace.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary Axelrod. Good morning. I am pleased to announce charges against Nicholas Boganikolos. As alleged in the complaint, for years, the defendant was involved in smuggling U.S. origin military and dual-use technologies to Russia. The defendant was recruited to Russia in 2017 to procure highly controlled technologies for Russia's military and research and development efforts. These sensitive items included advanced electronics and sophisticated testing equipment used in military applications, including quantum cryptography and nuclear weapons testing, as well as tactical battlefield equipment. The defendant personally certified that these items were to be used by the Aratos Group, a collection of defense and technology companies in the Netherlands and Greece that he controlled. In reality, he unlawfully reshipped them to Russia, helping to fuel Russia's war effort. The recipients in Russia included nuclear and quantum research facilities, as well as Russian intelligence agencies. The defendant was arrested last week in France, and my office will seek to extradite him. Our office has intensified our investigations and prosecutions of sanctions and export violations in light of Russia's aggression in Ukraine. We are committed to working with our law enforcement partners, both in the strike force and around the world, to combat and mitigate the unlawful proliferation of American-made technologies. With this prosecution, we again show our global reach and our shared commitment to preventing disruptive technologies from falling into the wrong hands. I want to recognize the incredible efforts by my team, Assistant U.S. Attorney Artie McConnell and litigation analyst Benjamin Richmond. I'd also like to convey special thanks to Trial Attorney Scott Claffey from the National Security Division and the special agents of the FBI and U.S. Department of Commerce, Office of Export Enforcement who worked on the case. And finally, I want to thank our partners in France and the Netherlands for their assistance. I'll now turn it over to U.S. Attorney Gary Restaino.
Good morning. Last Thursday, 2 Russian nationals were arrested in Arizona for conspiring to send export-controlled aircraft parts from the United States to Russia. Oleg Patsulia and Vasily Besedin are charged with conspiracies to violate the Export Control Reform Act and to commit money laundering. As alleged in the complaint, the conspirators fielded requests for parts directly from Russian airlines. The conspirators then went to parts suppliers in the United States and lied to these American companies about where the parts would be going. In particular, the defendants traveled to Arizona last September and attempted to purchase export-controlled aircraft brake systems from an Arizona company. The conspirators used the millions of dollars they received from Russian airlines to fund the scheme and to furnish their lifestyles. On Thursday of last week, federal authorities seized luxury goods purchased with proceeds of the scheme, including a late-model BMW and a 38-foot Sea Ray Sundancer boat. To us, this case is a great example of a collaborative strike force. First, among the prosecutors, it's a partnership between the U.S. Attorney's Office in Arizona and the National Security Division in Washington. And we also appreciate the support of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami on this investigation. We also commend the collaboration of the investigators. Foremost among them are the Phoenix Field Office of Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security, supported by agents from Boston and elsewhere around the country, and the FBI's Phoenix Field Office, supported by Miami agents. The Department of Homeland Security, through Homeland Security investigations, as well as Customs and Border Protection, also assisted, as did the United States Marshals Service in the investigative efforts on the case. I'll now turn it over to United States Attorney Martin Estrada from the Central District of California.
Good morning. My name is Martin Estrada. I'm the U.S. Attorney for the Central District of California, which is based in Los Angeles. My district is home to some of the nation's great universities, military installations, and high-tech companies. All these institutions are developing cutting-edge technologies critical to both our economy and our national security. As U.S. Attorney in a city that serves as the gateway to the Pacific Rim, I'm committed to disrupting criminal efforts by foreign nations to steal this technology. Last week, prosecutors in my office unsealed a criminal complaint charging a Southern California resident, Li Meng Li, with stealing technology from two companies he worked at in order to provide that technology to businesses in the People's Republic of China. As alleged in the complaint, for years, Mr. Li worked at two companies in Southern California that were in the business of creating software used in what is known as smart manufacturing. This is advanced technology for making sophisticated equipment, including parts for nuclear submarines and military aircraft. Because of its sensitive military applications, the software belonging to the two companies cannot be exported without a license from the Department of Commerce. Yet, while working for both companies, Mr. Li allegedly stole the source code for the company's software. He then created a separate business enterprise in the People's Republic of China and sought to participate in the PRC's 1,000 Talents program. Mr. Li marketed himself to businesses in China, including enterprises controlled by the People's Republic of China. He offered to use the technology he'd stolen to help them develop their own capabilities. He entered into a contract with a PRC-based company, and he recently traveled to China. Based on this conduct last week, Mr. Li was arrested upon returning to this country from China. I want to thank the FBI, the Department of Commerce, and all our partners in the Disruptive Technology Strike Force for their work on this case. The mission of the Department of Justice is to protect our nation and all of its residents, and my office will continue to safeguard our country by prosecuting those who steal our technology in order to provide it to foreign actors. I'd now like to introduce U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of California, Ismael Ramsey.
Good morning. Again, I'm Ismael Ramsey. I'm the United States Attorney for the Northern District of California. The Northern District encompasses generally the northwest quadrant of the state and includes the San Francisco Bay Area and the innovation capital of the world, Silicon Valley. Earlier today, the court unsealed a 6-count indictment. The indictment handed down by a federal grand jury on April 11, 2023, charges Weibao Wang with theft and attempted theft of trade secrets from Apple Incorporated. The alleged trade secrets concern Apple's research and development of technology related to autonomous systems, which has a variety of applications, including self-driving cars. According to the indictment, while employed with Apple as a software engineer working on a secret project, Wang accepted a job with the US-based subsidiary of a company headquartered in the People's Republic of China. That company was working to develop self-driving cars. Wang did not inform Apple that he was resigning until April 2018, 5 months later. But after accepting employment with the other company and before leaving Apple, Wang accessed a large amount of Apple's sensitive proprietary information, including various trade secrets that were later found on his own personal devices. Law enforcement searched Wang's Bay Area residence for Apple's proprietary materials. Wang was present during the search. Among the materials discovered from the devices in Wang's home was the source code for Apple's entire autonomous systems project as it existed around the time that Wang left Apple. Investigators also found many computer files containing confidential proprietary Apple materials and determined that several of these files were last accessed after Wang's departure from Apple. Later that day, Wang boarded a flight from San Francisco to Guangzhou, China. I do want to note that as in all criminal cases, Wang should be considered innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But if convicted, Wang faces up to 10 years in prison for each trade secret violation. We are pleased at the renewed focus and energy that the Disruptive Technology Task Force brings to securing Silicon Valley's innovation. We also appreciate the support of our law enforcement partners and the National Security Division pursuing this prosecution. I also want to thank our team at the U.S. Attorney's Office, our Special Prosecutions Division led by AUSA Laura Vartain, and our FBI partners in the field office in San Francisco. I'd now like to introduce the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Damian Williams.
Good morning. A few months ago, I stood here announcing charges by my office against members of a conspiracy directed from Iran to assassinate in New York City a journalist who has helped expose the brutal human rights violations of the Iranian government. Today, I'm here to announce that my office, in partnership with the Strike Force, has indicted a China-based defendant for participating in a scheme to supply Iran with technology used to produce weapons of mass destruction. As alleged, the defendant, Shengjiang Shou, conspired to send isostatic graphite to Iran in violation of U.S. sanctions. Isostatic graphite is a high-tech material used in the nose tips of intercontinental ballistic missiles. Let me be clear about two things. First, the Iranian regime of terror and repression and those who facilitate it pose a grave threat to our national security. Second, my office will continue to work relentlessly to bring to justice those who advance the interests of the Iranian regime and thereby threaten the safety and security of the American people. I want to thank AAG Olson and Assistant Secretary Axelrod for their leadership of the Strike Force, our partners at FBI's New York Counterintelligence Division for their exceptional investigative work, and our colleagues at the Department's National Security Division for their assistance. I also want to commend the career prosecutors in my office's National Security Unit handling the case, Jillian Grossman and Nicholas Bradley, and Matthew Hellman, my office's Strike Force coordinator. Thank you.
I guess a question for Matt and Matt. These cases, they seem, different kind of across the board. I mean, I know they all relate to technology, but they're all kind of different. Is this what we can expect from the task force going forward, that you'll just be kind of funneling these cases that are kind of across the board? or is the task force going to bring some kind of better coordination to the efforts?
So a couple thoughts on that. I mean, first of all, the goal of the task force, of the strike force, is to ensure that we are prioritizing these cases, and what unifies them is the fact that they involve the transfer or effort to transfer sensitive technologies to our adversaries. And as you note in your question, Chris, there's a number of countries that are involved, right? We have Russia, Iran, as well as China. And not only will we be able to prioritize these cases, but we'll be able to make sure that we're bringing resources to bear across the country. And really, thirdly, by what's represented here with the offices and the U.S. attorneys on stage, is that we are sharing best practices. We're learning about the intelligence. We have an analytics cell that is supporting the work of the strike force, so that we are able to take advantage of what we're learning from each of these types of cases that each of these offices are bringing, not only among these 5 offices, but across the entire strike force, which consists of 14 different cells around the country. So I think, again, in answer to your question, there's going to be a variety of the types of cases that we're going to bring, but what unifies them is the fundamental mission of the strike force, which is to prevent the transfer of the types of sensitive technologies that we're here talking about today.
This is a pretty startling array of sensitive technologies that you're alleging was adversaries are trying to steal here. If we can assume that you're only, as hard as you're working, you're only catching a fraction of this conduct, how big a problem is this for U.S. national security? And then I've got to just ask specifically the defendant Wang, how did he get on a plane to China if the FBI had probable cause to search his house?
So I'll take the first question, and I'll defer the second. I mean, look, this is a big problem, and that's why we stood up the strike force. And it was a recognition of the challenges we face. I think as Assistant Secretary Axelrod said, 20 years ago we were focused on Al-Qaeda. Today, as much as anything, we're focused on these nation states that are posing a threat across a variety of threat vectors, but in particular, the transfer of sensitive technology. So what this strike force represents is a recognition of that threat and a determination to bring all the tools that we have to bear to address it. And look, are we going to stop every transfer of every sensitive technology? We're not going to get to zero, but I think you're seeing in places like Russia, where the efforts of not only the United States, but our allies and partners around the world to prevent the transfer of technology to Russia in support of its war effort is having a significant and detrimental effect on the Russian economy and, in particular, on its military readiness. So I think it is having an impact. Let me ask you to address the Wang question, if I may.
Unfortunately, the same evening as that search warrant was served, at approximately 8:34 that evening, he was able to purchase a one-way ticket and fly out that same night at 11:55, as alleged in the indictment.
For you, Matt. Actually, 2 quick questions, one on topic, one off topic. I'm wondering, some of this conduct seems to date back many years, just in terms of the general thrust of the theft of sensitive technology. Is there something about 2023 and what's happening now in the current landscape that makes this task force especially pertinent and this conduct sort of especially pernicious? And the second question is, in light of the Durham report yesterday, does that affect your messaging at all on 702 in terms of how you pitched to Congress about the need for 702 in light of the harsh criticism of the FBI?
Yeah, let me take the first question first. So yes, these cases, as you know, they're complex cases. I was in AUSA for many years. I understand how hard it is to bring cases like this. It takes months, if not longer, to put them together. And you have some of the top U.S. attorneys in the country represented here, and some of the biggest offices. There's no doubt that these cases go back some period of time, and that just reflects the complexity of them. But your question about why are we doing this now? One, as I mentioned in the last question from Ken, this threat is as significant as ever. So we are trying to marshal our resources and prioritize these cases. And by doing so, by bringing the strike force to bear around the country, by marshaling our efforts, we were able to push these cases forward and help bring them to this important milestone that we have today, in which we're able to announce charges in 5 separate cases. So This is our first set of cases we're announcing. You can expect more. As the task force is, as of today, exactly 3 months old, I expect we'll continue to move down this path. Let me actually ask Assistant Secretary Axelrod to see if there's anything more on that question, and I'll return and answer your second.
So why now? Because the threat is that important. I think if you look at this year's annual threat assessment that the Office of the Director of National Intelligence puts out, the beginning of that report is all about nation-state actors. It's China, it's Russia, it's Iran, North Korea. And as Assistant Attorney General Olson said, those threats come in a variety of ways, but one of them that is pressing and persistent is the attempts by those governments to acquire U.S. technology in order to try to advance their military capabilities so that it can leapfrog ours. And we want to do everything in our power to prevent that from happening. And it's one of the reasons why we stood up the strike force and why the strike force has been so active, and 3 months after it was announced, is starting to you're starting to see results. As Matt said, obviously the cases began a while ago, but by sending that demand signal from headquarters here in D.C. that this is a priority for the Attorney General, for the Deputy Attorney General, for the Assistant Attorney General, and for us over at the Commerce, as well as at FBI and HSI, I think we're really doing what we can to make sure that these cases get the priority they need and deserve, because obviously prosecutors are busy, agents are busy, they have lots of different cases to work, and we want these right at the top of their pile, and I think by the actions today, we're showing that they are.
So on your second question on the Durham report, which was released yesterday afternoon, I had the chance to first review it when it was released to the public yesterday afternoon. As you know, it's hundreds of pages long. As you can imagine, it's being carefully reviewed within the department and to ensure that we take any necessary steps in response to the report. On Section 702, as you know, I've been very engaged on seeking to make the case for the reauthorization of Section 702 of FISA. As the Attorney General and the Director of National Intelligence said earlier this year, it is an absolutely essential authority for the collection of foreign intelligence and in the protection of our national security, and we are actively engaged now with Congress in describing the need for Section 702, as well as explaining some of the steps we've taken to address some of the concerns that have been raised about its implementation. And that progress, that effort is ongoing and will continue until we get the authority reauthorized.
Evan, you may want more. This is a question for I guess, two Matts, Matt squared. So one of the more devastating weapons in the Russian arsenal in Ukraine has been the use of Iranian drones, and we've seen pictures, certainly from the Ukrainian government, showing a lot of common American technologies and other Western technologies being used in these drones and in other weapons. Can you tell us whether there's any changes? Is there any more restrictions being put on some of these technologies? Is there something more that we can expect to see from the U.S. attorneys or from you, from here at NSD, in reaction to that?
So let me say, first of all, as you know, I'm not going to comment on any ongoing investigations in regard to your question. I'm going to ask maybe Matt Axelrod to address the broader question.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. No, it's something that we're highly focused on, which is making sure that Western parts, that we're able to reduce and restrict the flow of Western parts so they don't end up in missiles and drones that are killing civilians and soldiers in Ukraine. And we're doing that in a bunch of ways. First, the controls themselves have been overwhelmingly successful. Overall exports to Russia have dropped nearly 90%, but that has led, sort of as your question suggests, to the Russian government, the Russian military trying to find ways to evade our controls and still get the parts they need. So what we're doing is we are focused intently on the specific categories of items. They're mostly semiconductors and electronic circuits that are being used to power those missiles and drones, and we're going after that problem in a number of ways. One, we're talking to U.S. manufacturers of those problems to show the data of how those items are getting transshipped through third countries to Russia, to ask them to be extraordinarily careful when they have customers, for example, who didn't exist prior to the invasion and now pop up and are ordering lots of these items. We're talking with them. We're talking with foreign governments. I was in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan a few weeks ago, along with a counterpart from the Treasury Department, as well as colleagues from the UK and EU, to deliver this message, to share data that shows transshipment of these semiconductors going through Central Asia to Russia, and to ask the governments in those countries to help us with that. We've also put companies in third countries on our entity list. We had did that, I think, a few weeks ago. 28 companies in a number of foreign countries that are being used to transship items to Russia. So yes, it's something that we're aware of and are taking a multi-pronged approach to work on. I also think later this week, or maybe early next week, we'll also be putting out some guidance that can help financial institutions and industry know what to focus on to deal with this problem as well.
All right, thanks, everybody. Thank you.